Somebody was mentioning about like you like having like a poster boy for like pharma. It's institutional, right? That's just for good reason. Some people have like just don't like institutions. And then Martin, I think you are actually like have a lot of cred with those people. Like
I went to jail going against institutions.
Exactly. Which is why I really admire that you're kind of like, because a lot of people I feel like are not going to say anything. Vivek won't say anything because he's got to get elected. And
it's pretty easy to dismiss me as well. But I think that people like Vivek kind of. He should be the one having to do this, right? Like, he's not had the controversies I've had. People have tried to manufacture controversies for him, and I don't think he's ever really done anything wrong in it. But he knows medicine. He knows medicine as well as I do.
Oh, he definitely.
The other thing, Martin, is from Capitol Hill side, from the Capitol Hill, generally mean very well, and there's doctors that are on the relevant committees. These are not dumb people. The chair of Senate Help is a doctor Republican from Louisiana. He is not part of a conspiracy with pharmaceutical companies. I mean, there are no pharmaceutical companies.
Dr. Farouk, go ahead.
I'm a hospitalist, and I've seen such a long COVIDs, and there are still ivermectin who come in and tell us we need ivermectin and hydrochloroquine, and not the proper treatment, which is just the steroids or some support. And but if you look at the flip side, yes, the FDA has been giving medication left and right. Yeah, this is right or this is wrong. Great medications like Ozempic or Wegovy. Now the Ozempic is for diabetes, morbid obesity, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver. They're studying it in obstructive sleep apnea. And I was part in some research when the Ozempic was under phase 1 and phase 2 trial, and it had results then, and now it's a very significant, important medicine, which kind of changed. So there are some negative and positive, but this belief of ivermectin is both spectrum, on the extreme right and extreme left. I've seen some of the extreme right people who came in and they were like, no, we want ivermectin, hydrochloroquine. And there's one which is right on the left, and they're all green.
I think it's, and I think we're getting at the social part of it that Julio and others, Julio, I should say. I always mess this up.
It's
Julio, yeah. That I think we're getting at, which is that this is a societal phenomenon where people want to stick it to authority. People are sick of authority. Authority has encroached on us in a lot of ways. Censorship online, taxes, Patriot Act and monitoring our communications, sending people to jail for no reason. That's why Trump won. I don't know if landslide's the right word, but that's why he won, because there's a huge backlash against this type of mentality that is overarching and overbearing, and we hate it. So that has affected everyone differently. For me, it hasn't changed my life's work of loving science and studying it and knowing what good science looks like and knowing what bad science looks like, and sometimes making millions of dollars short selling bad science and the other way around. And then, for some people, though, it's colored everything, where they've said, I don't trust anything anymore. And I think that it's not the worst thing in the world to say you trust things less, but it's not healthy to say you trust nothing anymore. And it's really unhealthy to say you don't trust things so much that you're going to go on the other side and say, I'm going to do everything my way. And it's just irresponsible, because it's sort of like saying the airplane that was built, I don't trust it, I'm going to build my own airplane. Look at Boeing, they're corrupt, they're bad people. No, you're going to just go on an airplane and you're going to shut up. And, it's the same thing when you literally everything you do. Or you can be Amish. You can be Amish and you can go, live on a farm or something. Or you could be like Terry Davis and write your own OS. You can make your own router. you can make your own programming language. You can do everything from scratch, and it's just kind of nuts. But there are people like this, and I feel like it's helpful in these online echo chambers. It's helpful to raise one's hand and say, no, you're not being normal. You're being weird, and not so much to shut down inquiry. By the way, the inquiry could be something like, we should do a phase 3 trial. A drug company, like, why don't we pressure Eli Lilly, who's worth $1 trillion, right? Eli Lilly's almost, it's 750 billion at the moment. It had a little downdraft, but Eli Lilly is the biggest drug company in the history of the world. It would be very easy for Eli Lilly to spend $50 million and do a phase 3 clinical trial of any of these drugs. in any disease and publish the results, have it be monitored by a third party, all the normal stuff, CRO, and we could show the world this just doesn't work. Have Joe Rogan. Like, I think that the CEO of Eli Lilly go on Joe Rogan and say, hey, really unhelpful. And Joe Rogan can sit there and say, oh yeah, well, all the CEO of Eli Lilly has to do is say, okay, I have $100 million for you. Design the clinical trial you think will work, and I'll prove to you it doesn't work. And you could do all the monitoring. You can run the study if you want. And I think that would go a much longer way. Like, there were people in the 80s that were proponents of ESP, extrasensory perception, that they could guess the number in your mind and stuff like that. Even Alan Turing himself believed in this. And it was conclusively disproven that you cannot read people's thoughts. This reminds me of that we can just guess that there are drugs that work for diseases without doing the trials. It's flabbergasted me. And I think that, the better thing to do is to prove people wrong as opposed to engage them and fight with them. Just say, okay, do the trial. You think it works? Go ahead, do the trial. And I even think the Congress could give ivermectin regulatory approval, for regulatory exclusivity so that it does get a new patent. By the way, you can always adjust a drug like very modestly to get a new patent. But in any event, if it's so good, pay for it. Do the clinical trials. It's just so stupid to think like, oh, I bet this. No, I bet that. Well, why don't we just find out?
I'll show you. Yeah.
And I think people don't trust that process of finding out and trust that somebody responsible is going to report it correctly. They're just going to go back to, of course you said it didn't work, just that it doesn't work. And it just it keeps going back in a circle that's really unhelpful. So I don't know what the answer is other than ignore stupidity, but I also feel like when millions of people see something Joe Rogan puts out, that somebody has to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. And for me, I just meant it to be one message, one tweet, but it ends up getting 1 million views and people want to hear more. But mostly people just want to yell, scream, and feel like really, like angsty and angry at authority in general, not just pharma, but just any kind of purported authority.
I'm not. I don't know too much, but back to the big pharma thing. I think a lot of that unrest came after the COVID hit, and you saw I think the third phase, because it was an emergency thing. It just got pushed everywhere. Like those trials weren't.
What are you talking about? The vaccine?
The vaccine, yeah. And
yeah, but I would consider that a big pharma success story that saved probably tens of millions of lives. So
yeah,
I know that's
people saying the opposite, like young people are having heart problems, like all these adverse things.
Myocarditis.
Yeah, I believe that's what it's called.
But isn't that okay? Like, I have like a question there, like serious question. A lot of people talk about this, but from my understanding of myocarditis, it's something that is actually like common in a lot of viral infections, and it's like this transient like condition.
Well, you still have that question of is the juice worth the squeeze, right? So, are you getting sufficiently? This is literally why the FDA exists, because this is a tough question. Are you getting the therapeutic benefit in exchange for the therapeutic drawback? There's always a drawback. Even just administering a drug is a drawback, let alone the coordination of administering medicine and the vigilance, the pharmacovigilance that has to occur to observe it and monitor it, let alone the invasiveness of an intramuscular injection, the pain of it, the massive immune response that you get. All these things are annoying. So the question remains, was this a therapeutically beneficial thing to do? And I don't think the right answer is just to scream, clot shot, big pharma, et cetera. The therapeutic, the question is from both a clinical trial perspective, where the clinical trial data were excellent for what it's worth, but then from a meta perspective, the epidemiological public health perspective, knowing that a clinical trial is a point in time and that it's a point in time that can't be recreated. When you do a clinical trial of psoriasis patients and it clears their skin, you can feel very comfortable that when you give your patient the drug that was done in that clinical trial, that your psoriasis patient is probably like the other 1,000 psoriasis patients that took it, and that you'll see the same effect. But in public health and epidemiology, you have a really hard time doing that because this clinical trial occurred when this virus was just coming out and it had remarkable results. But we know viruses change, there's selective pressure, there's all kinds of things that happen with herd immunity. And and whatnot, the mutations resulted in these vaccines perhaps not working as well as they did in the clinical trial, or whatever the reason is. The point is that it's something that's pretty unpredictable. And I think when you do public health, it's very challenging to get this right. But it's not I think here you have the same dynamic of the fault or the blame displacement. So the blame I have on the establishment is that I got arrested and I had to spend 4 years in prison learning, urban slang and urban, sort of lore. I know all types of information about guns and gangs and drugs that you will never need to know. And I'm annoyed by that, and I'm frustrated by that, and I made the most of it, but I'm still really angry at somebody for that. And that somebody is amorphous. There's no one person that I have to be angry at. It's this whole establishment. There's this whole institution of authority that I hate. And, maybe that means I should cast a vote for somebody differently. But for some people, it means I'm going to be angry at all of the authority, all of the so-called experts. They all suck. I hate them all. And I think that's where, these kind of phenomenons happen. And if you look at Mel Gibson, I don't have a ton to say about this guy, but basically he's become a huge anti-Semite, which is, I was born Catholic for what it's worth, here in New York City. A lot of people, when they get angry, and this isn't just now, but over the last thousands of years, they seem to, for whatever reason, want to blame Jewish people. And, Mel Gibson, got into this very kind of anti-Semitic mode where he turned from like this relatively normal actor into this kind of whack job. And there's a South Park episode about him where he's just like running around and smearing his feces all over the place. And the kids are sort of laughing at him, but it's a great episode. But the point is that the guy is just out of control, and he's been sort of canceled, and people want to sort of make something about his cancellation more than what it is. He's just canceled because he's crazy. And, I have no reason to sort of like feel one way about it or the other. He made a film. He stopped making films, I guess. People, have sort of blacklisted him. But, for him to be angry at that and then blame Jewish people, now blame the medical industry, I could understand him blaming, people in Hollywood and say, okay, this is what Hollywood did to me. Well, that's your circle. But now you take your anger and blame and go point at the medical industry and say, okay, ivermectin's a treatment for cancer. Well, no, it's not. What do you know about treatments for cancer? I could quiz you for 5 minutes about basic science like cell theory, cell biology, basic like high school, even middle school chemistry, and you would fail because you don't know about this stuff. Any more than I know what 38mm film is. I have no idea how to make a movie or how that, all the intricacies that go into that. I don't know what SAG is or whatever that stuff is. Like, I have no clue. You quiz me on that, I would fail immediately. I couldn't tell you what the Golden Globes are. But that's not my area. I stay in my lane. This is my lane. Medicine is my thing. And anybody who's watched me over the last even 2 years, but even over 20 years knows that like one of the things I do the best is point out fraud in medicine and short sell stocks that have drugs that don't work. And by and large, the drug industry, 80-90% of it is really pretty honest, trying to make a great drug. The other 20% isn't fraud. It's just companies that they kind of should know better than to try to develop a drug that doesn't work. But in terms of drugs that get FDA approved, those are 99.9% kind of good to go. And again, I call them out when I see them. Like there was a drug called lorcaserin, which was a drug from Arena Pharma that was acquired by Pfizer. And I had a private meeting with the FDA where I urged them to not approve this drug. This is a weight loss drug. It was a 5-HT2A antagonist, or it was 2C antagonist. And so the 2B antagonist was known as fen-phen, which you guys may remember, the fenfluramine part of fen-phen, not the phentermine part. So fenfluramine was a 5-HT2B antagonist, which was had caused cardiovascular problems because that enzyme's expressed, or that channel is expressed in cardiovascular tissue. And so I came up with all this information about 5-HT2B or 2C antagonist lorcaserin. It only resulted in 2% weight loss above placebo, which is basically nothing. And I said, it's not worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze here. This is a new molecule. It's really dangerous. Should not be FDA approved. They approved it anyway. And 5 years later, the manufacturer took the drug off the market and the FDA demanded that they do that. So the point is, like, I have no vested interest against any of these companies. I love making money by short selling them and taking them to task, whether it's at FDA or in the public or whatever. It's just sad to me that, people will throw away their brain because they hate something or they hate authority or they hate big pharma, but they'll also take those medicines when they need them. So, you know, it's.
I had a quick question, actually. I don't want to like
Yeah, go ahead,
sidetrack too much. But what is your opinion on exenatide? Because that was also like GLP-1 agonist, but obviously not nearly the.
Yeah, that was the first. It was the first GLP. I remember when I was 17 and I read about it. You know, it was a Gila monster venom molecule through mass spec. They found that the Gila monster, which is this weird little lizard, runs around and spits its venom, and it's got GLP in the venom. And we, you know, basically this company called Amylin, which they named their company after another gut hormone called amylin. Amylin Pharmaceuticals synthesized it. They you know, they called it exenatide, and they got it approved for diabetes. And that was the start of the GLP phenomenon. That was approved by the FDA in 2005. I remember very distinctly because I was shorting it because I didn't think people would use the drug very often. It wasn't.
You were right.
Well, I was wrong and I was right in some ways because it was a daily injection. It was actually a twice daily injection. It was terrible. And then eventually they made a long-acting version, and then Eli Lilly made a super long-acting version called Trulicity that sold really well. And then Ozempic and Mounjaro came out, and the third generation GLPs were incredible drugs that, you know, millions of people are taking and has been a renaissance for pharma. So again, you know, if you can't color pharma with one brush, there's obviously companies that aren't that great, like Purdue, that don't really do research, and there's companies like Lilly that do a really great job. And so, like, you know, I don't know. To me, you know, this whole thing is so stupid, but, you know, I just wanted to address it real quick. I got to run. Thanks so much, guys, for joining. If there's somebody that from the pro-ivermectin camp that wants to have like a debate, I certainly could understand why you wouldn't want to do that, but I'd be certainly as friendly as possible and very open-minded. But, you know, it's just totally irresponsible in my opinion. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys.